For joining us here today. I have a number of things I wanted to talk about today. That was the new intro, music by Shill Scanner. If you want to support his work, go to shillscanner.com. And before I go on, first of all, how is the sound? I'm new on Facebook streaming. I got booted off YouTube for the 11st time, decided to quit. The main thing I want to talk about, well, this isn't the main thing. This is just random. Someone today had said something about a video I did last year where I suggested that Walt Disney was not only Adolf Hitler, but that Adolf Hitler was a woman. And I did this mainly just to tick off the, what do you call the people, the Hitler fanboys. So I want to show you a video that came across my desk this morning. Just random. And, I listened to it for about 2 or 3 minutes. I'm like, holy crap, I think I recognize that voice. Okay, check this out. Quote from Manly P. Hall. Bizarre side of the interwebs. But here you go. Boys who think that elite transgenderism is only a Jew thing, but no. Looks like your poster boy here might be a poster girl. And I found this article about his sex life or lack thereof, and it had something very strange. 2 things. One, it says his biographer went on to say something about his, well, when he was seen naked, he was afraid of being seen naked because he had a genital abnormality. They do say proof of 1 testicle. You may have heard about that. In penile hypospadias, in which the urethra. Okay, that's enough. Okay, anyway, this was just a troll we had done. But anyway, the strange thing is, some channel called Truth Seeker took it as serious, and so Truth Seeker took it from someone else, and of course, it never got traced back to me. I mean, no one gave me credit for it, which I'm glad for. But it's 3 or 4 people have mirrored this content and cited it as some type of authoritative source that Adolf Hitler was a woman. Hippie Hitler. No, this is just all a really bad joke. I'm just showing you here to illustrate how rumors spread on the internet, how gossip spreads, how people who do not accept things critically just pass on bad ideas, almost like a virus. There's that book by Richard Brody, Mind Virus, where he makes the case that ideas, memetics, his concept of the analogy between genes and memes, that some ideas literally spread like sicknesses, like the cold, like the flu. And they spread to people who have poor immune systems, in that case being they don't have critical thinking filtering out bad ideas. Maybe they don't even have a methodology to even try. They just accept passively. And that's what we're dealing with here, is that we're actually trained as a society to passively accept whatever whatever the priesthood class would have us believe. So let me go ahead and get back on track here. I wanted to mainly focus on the Mars thing. A lot of Mars news showing up recently. And the reason why Mars is worth looking at is that if you're objective about it, if you're critical about Mars, you'll have to admit that the lifestyle associated with Mars is nearly identical to that of a slave. It amounts to slave labor, the absence of freedom. And that's the heaven they're promising. And like all heavens, you can't access it unless you divest yourself of worldly desires, worldly wealth, your accretions of wealth. You can no longer pass through the gates to Mars than a rich man can pass into the gates of heaven. It's one of these things where they've even used environmentalism, the very fraud of environmentalism, to further make this case that not only do we have to leave because the globe's going to punish us, but that our carbon footprint itself is more or less an original sin. We have a new priesthood. So I'm looking at how they describe this thing as they rolled out their ideal society, and that's the main thing that I like to point out is that when they establish this new society on Mars, it's not going to be America. I mean, what do you think it's going to be? It's not going to be America. It's not going to be free. It's going to be maybe direct democracy, but it's going to be a survival situation. It's going to be a life or death communism. It's literally communism. But look at this here. This is interesting too. I was over at the NASA website. Right now, you can go apply at NASA for the Mars landing events. If you want to be involved in the Mars project, you can get involved right now if you are a digital creator. So all you who make memes, the real clever animated ones, the doors are open. You can apply right now. Digital creators apply for NASA Mars event. So what they're really involved in here is constructing in the minds of the masses an idea of a better world where they get a blank slate, start over. It's all about the perfectibility of man through the perfectibility of his institutions. If his institutions forbade free market capitalism, well then maybe man's nature wouldn't have polluted the world the way that it has to the point where the ice caps are melting and we have to GTFO to Mars. This is the same story. And, lately I've been thinking about how the media is something that we are having to openly declare to be a worthless institution, anachronistic. It's just an attempt to centralize perception, that we ought to be post-media. I say anti-media, but that's just really the path. It's the process of getting there, but it's post-media. And I think that we also need to start thinking about post-religion and really taking a real objective look at what religion is and what it promises and how it only masquerades as harmless. Like all totalitarianism, it's always posited as something for your own good. You have all these, look, you need no more evidence that this entire system is designed to create a totalitarian state than the government-sponsored stalkers that I have full-time. Like Axo, the head editor of Reddit, we're joined here by a celebrity. Head editor of Reddit has almost 1 million subscribers. He's been regulating people talking about conspiracy theories. He's been really shilling for NASA for 7 or 8 years. Just, they say something, it's true. You can't question it. And to me, it's just a new priesthood. And so I think we need to be critical about religion, about utopianism, about big government offering utopian paradise futures if we just give them enough power. It's all different aspects of the same thing. Communism, for example, is a religion. It says abolition of all religions in the manifesto, one of the main platforms, and yet it itself is state-olatry. And so I'm thinking that in addition to speaking about anti-media, I think we also need to start talking about anti-religion, post-religion. Now, I don't want to go shut down anything. I don't think Fox News needs to be shut down or CNN by anybody or anything. Not at all. Nor do I think that religions need to be shut down. But I think that bad ideas and outmoded ways of looking at things need to be exposed for what they are. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I think we can objectively say that anybody claiming to have knowledge about the future is, I'm not going to say consciously trying to con you, but they're making claims that they can't back up. And that kind of charlatanism, I think, I think we should just consider it lying. If you consider yourself a prophet, I'm going to call you a liar. It's like lying generally refers to the past. You're changing what happened with words. You're describing what happened already in a different way. We think of lying as just manipulating the past to gain favor in the present. Well, what about when you lie about the future? You confabulate a future to have more power in the present. Liars lie for power in the now, whether they are fabricating the past or fabricating the future. And so I'm done with all the prophets. Al Gore's, fire and brimstone preachers, all of them. Okay, this is where we were heading to, and this is from the Guardian. Okay, so I've been speaking about this for a while. That one thing we ought to do is agitate that the environmentalists take a real close look at what we're actually describing when we're talking about colonizing Mars. Colonizing Mars. Colonizing Mars is basically suggesting that maybe we ought to be able, I mean, holy crap. Tell me the sound's not off. Just a second. Okay, no, it's on. If my sound's glitching out, don't worry about it. I'm recording it. You can get the full thing later. Just go to infiniteplanesociety.com, and that has links to where my videos are. I'm not centralized on any one single platform for obvious reasons. Everything's going on BitChute and Minds and everything else. Okay, but anyway, we're talking about the Mars colonization thing. And I've been saying for a while that environmentalists ought to be against it because if we can't go mess up Antarctica, for example, because, it has to be kept human free because we screw everything up, then how can we justify destroying another planet? The moon I can understand if it's dead, no harm, if anything, we should make it better. But Mars, do we have the right to infringe on foreign environments? And I would think that environmentalists ought to be against it. And one reason I think this might be worth agitating for is that environmentalists have always been for the space program because the space program is connected to it. The space program uses the threat of climate chaos to make the case we need to vacate this so-called planet. Look, this is what Stephen Hawking said right before he, quote, died, before they unplugged him, before they stopped replacing this animatronics batteries. I mean, I don't think the person was ever alive. But anyway, he made the bleak prediction. Stephen Hawking was an oracle. And I'm done with oracles. Sophia, the robot, there's no such thing. If they bring you AI or whatever, it's going to be Elon Musk speaking through a, just remotely. It's all going to be just remote operated robots positing that, they're going to be claiming, yeah, I'm real, I'm conscious. And it might pass itself off, but we're talking about just a puppet, more or less, right? So Stephen Hawking was just a new world order sock puppet, preaching doomsday. And then another aspect to these oracles is that you can't really question what they say. It's a one-way thing. It's a pronouncement. It's a divine decree. You can't really answer back. How do you answer back to an oracle, to an object that speaks or is said to, or a prophecy cast in the entrails, of a cow, or in the stars? All these different ways that the mumbo jumbo that the priest class have always used. They present something that you can understand because it's so highly specialized, and their priesthood, they have their own class of people. They're priests, they're mediators, they're intercessors between you and this higher form of knowledge, whatever is behind the curtain. And we're supposed to just accept whatever they say at face value. So when your preacher says, there's going to be 7 years of tribulation starting 9/23/2017, you're supposed to take it seriously. And I don't. I think that prophecy is just a form of lying. I don't think we should trust prophets anymore. If the weatherman can't tell you what's going to happen in 7 days, you're going to trust when they say it's going to happen like 2030, what? The ice caps are going to melt and Florida's going to be underwater. You listen to all the doomsday prophecies of Al Gore that did not come true. Not a coincidence, he coordinated a lot of his doomsday scenarios to go with 2012. And they were heavily invested in New Age doomsday 2012 Nibiru stuff. Again, Nibiru, prophecies. How many people do you know fell for that? I mean, Alex Jones started off pushing Y2K. Oh, this is going to happen. It's all going to go down. No, it's not. So, Stephen Hawking said that humans had 100 years left on Earth, and faced with a growing list of threats: climate change, hoax; overpopulation, hoax; nuclear war, hoax. Hawking believed that we had reached the point of no return and had no choice as a species but to become multiplanetary, starting with Mars. How convenient, you know. How convenient that the oracles always lay out that the solution to our problems is to do exactly what the leadership says we need to do. Elon Musk has also said on numerous occasions we need a backup planet in case we have an apocalypse, like an asteroid coming to destroy the Earth. I see we've been joined by a number of people. Thank you for coming in. Go ahead and go to infiniteplanesociety.com and sign up for live notifications. And that's also the site where you'll find links to latest uploads, latest videos. All right, move on. Mars colonization. The case against it. So I've been saying for a while that environmentalists got to be against this thing at some point. Someone's going to resist it. And I actually have a couple of books here, science fiction books on the subject. The first one's called Red Mars. The second one's called Green Mars. And it's about terraforming Mars. Green Mars is about the first post-terraformed Mars society, where they have a significant departure from their original intent. They have a schism. One group says, do we really want to do to Mars what we did to Earth? Because they had to go to Mars as a result of a cataclysm on the Earth caused by man. And so there's a kind of a debate where, do we go primitive or do we go high-tech? I didn't finish the book, but it was written decades ago, and I'm seeing here these same science fiction themes and stories are just being presented as hypothetical realities if we just follow the leaders. So here's Elon Musk standing before his proposed Martian city. Again, this is the space utopia. And then you have your obelisk over here. This is basically like, it's not basically, the domes. Look at the domes and the rockets. Pay attention to the iconography here. Werner von Braun, who dreamed up this thing, dreamed up Mars colonization, said the dictator on Mars would be the Elon. And here you have Elon in front of his Mars colony, which is what? A bunch of domes and rockets, or domes and obelisks. Von Braun, Nazi, Catholic, Vatican agent, said that the new form of government on Mars would be not freedom, not America, it would in fact be a new papacy. That's why we call him Pope Elon. I have a lot to say about Pope Elon. I may have to, in fact, if you read
it's like, if, I mean,
Secret Religion of the Elite, I have a number of statements and articles about him. This is where he's talking about Mars as a place to die. And I'm going to take a quick break here. This is Pope Elon by One-Eyed Jack and the Shells.
we're all going to die someday. And if you're going to pick some place to die, then why not Mars?
Okay.
You know, if we're born on Earth, why not die on Mars? Seems like maybe it'd be quite exciting. But so I think given the choice of dying on Earth or dying on Mars, I'd say, yeah, sure, I'll die on Mars.
Father, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Give us each our daily bread, and forgive us our sins. For we ourselves forgive everyone who is indebted to us. And lead us not into temptation.
And there you have the gravestone of Werner von Braun. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Doesn't say the dome, doesn't say the curved, enclosed sky that locks us all in. Doesn't say any of that. Okay, so plans are being made to colonize Mars. Sorry, the dome thing is just obnoxious. There's no basis for believing in a dome. To me, the dome is a containment unit. That's why it's all over the Vatican. That's why it's all over the Mars colony. Domes are containment units. It's referring to your prisons, the domains. The dome is not a good thing. It's just an enclosure. It's your cage. We have all these people worshiping their cage. Just as bizarre as worshiping a cross. You want to worship an instrument of execution with some dangling corpse on it? Be my guest. You want to venerate a containment unit designed to keep you in a little fiefdom? This is space communism. Let me show you something. Nothing new about this. Nothing new about space communism. Okay, here we go. This is something that's been promised for about 100 years now. You find a lot of Soviet, here we go, moon bases. But for a long time, they've been using space as, hey, this is where everything's going to be Jetsons. This is where everything will be perfect. The world will unite. We will have world peace so that we can all, work together and reach for the stars. That's the one world order. That's the Tower of Babylon. That's connecting heaven to earth under a single world power. Look, the only thing I can find, I'm looking for this image. It's on the Flat Earth Report. Soviet cities on the moon. So anyway, more of the same. Space communism. It's not going to be free market capitalism making this go. You're all going to be dependents on the system. And I don't care. If you want to go to Mars, go for it. But what they're doing here is making the case that we don't have a choice. It's been laid out pretty clearly by Jeff Bezos and Musk. They both have two visions, but very similar. Musk has said that the world is doomed. We have to go to Mars. Bezos has said, the world's not doomed, but we have to go to Mars or it will be doomed, and those here on Earth will have to deal with constraints. In other words, population control, to make the Earth habitable long term. So they both made the case that freedom has to go. In both of these scenarios, freedom has to go, although Bezos did say that space itself will be where you still have freedom and liberty, if you consider this to be freedom. There are two types of liberty. There's the positive and negative. And in a way, you could say that if you're in a prison, you are free from certain things. You're free from the responsibility to have to provide for yourself, shelter, food, and all that. So you have freedom from, but you don't have freedom to. You can't go anywhere. You don't have any options. So early this month, and if I had known, I would have been up there, 60 scientists and engineers met at the University of Colorado Boulder. Their agenda, Mars colonization. They were members of NASA's Mars exploration program. It was a Mars workshop. It says they want a sustainable human colony on Mars in the next 40 to 100 years. Now, I actually think that they are going to sell a whole lot of dupes seats in heaven. That's what they're doing. Carbon taxes, all this environmentalism where they treat it as though if you give the government money, it undoes the damage that your pollution did. It's all a ruse. It's a Ponzi scheme. But they may in fact sell people seats to Mars, and people will say, well, sure, I'll put on a spacesuit and go to Mars, leave my car, my house, my life behind, my bank account, but I'll go farm potatoes on Mars, which, by the way, will be made from 20% recycled human excrement, as will the utensils that you use, which will all be 3D printed, reused human excrement. Look it up. I'm not making any of this stuff up. NASA has an obsession with turning humans into worms to cultivate the soil, and then they will reap whatever, they will harvest it for themselves. That's what they do. They're turning you into slaves. So living on Mars does represent a return to like an agrarian lifestyle. It's a agrarian reformation, and that's why I call him Pope Elon as well. This there was this Pope Constantine, who was responsible for what we would call serfdom. Taking the tenant farmers, the coloni, their traditional lands, traditional properties, and essentially just turning everyone into slaves in place under the authority of the one system, under the authority of Rome. It's kind of like a form of communism, you could say. I would say that what Constantine did wasn't a good thing. I think, if anything else, it was the best way to describe it. It was a proto-communist revolution, and that's what the space program has always been a cover for. It's communism. Environmentalism is the stalking horse for communism. It has been for a long time. They weren't able to convince capitalists to give up their lifestyles. So they instead tried the opposite approach, and let's shame them out of their lifestyles and tell them, well, your cars are dooming the planet. Your hairspray just punched a hole in the ozone. Oh, you just had another kid? Well, that's like another tumor on the side of Mother Earth. They guilt trip you about everything, from what you eat, everything you consume. The new big thing is, oh, people use plastic drinking straws. Like, that's looked down on. If you didn't know, it's looked down on. Because by looking down and shaming somebody who's using a plastic straw, you're saving the planet. It's a sin. It's a new sin. We have new sins. And all totalitarian states do this. They all have different ways of, rewarding the ones who go with the program, punishing those who don't. So Mars, the program itself, as far as I'm concerned, is a big ruse, and they're going to sell people tickets to Mars, and they're going to go, and they're not going to end up on Mars. You're going to be shuttled off to some gulag in China somewhere, farming potatoes for the Chinese government. And all your money and wealth will have been passed on to Musk and company. Like, it's really genius if you think about it. You're selling these people into slavery, but they think it's progress because they think they're on Mars. But they're just in a big Truman Show enclosure that looks like Mars. And they work all day. They don't have time to do much else. And it's not like they can run because they can't take off the big clunky spacesuit like iron burqas. A whole lot of dupes. And who knows? They may not even do that. They may ship everyone off and just, dump them in the ocean somewhere and then replace them with CGI. So once a month you get a little CGI briefing like the ISS footage where they just wave at the camera and smile. But it's all augmented virtual reality. I have no reason to believe that they have that much use for slave labor anyway. They're probably going to replace people anyhow. That type of stuff with totally brainwashed people who don't need to be re-educated, as in the next generation. I mean, look, the good analogy here, Truman Show. Look at the Truman Show, how he was held in place by the lies of everybody around him. And so he was totally brainwashed. He had no idea there was anywhere else to go. He didn't question the histories, didn't question anything. And so when you have a gulag system like this, the ones born into it will serve it. They'll defend it. They don't know anything else. And they'll see people who question it as enemies of the state. That's one of the reasons why you see the left right now agitating the youth. David Hogg and company. They're agitating the youth against the older generations, and you find it in their rhetoric. David Hogg has some pretty brutal things to say about how we're gonna outlive the NRA. The youth communist movements are very dangerous, specifically because they're easy to agitate and they're just goaded into doing things, into becoming cannon fodder. They're not sophisticated enough to understand how they're being played, nor are their parents. They're being taught to vote against their own interests. They're being told that they're victims of 17 years of school shootings, that they're the mass school shooting generation. And so you have Hogg and company traveling across the country, getting recently graduated high school students to sign up to vote and vote against guns. Well, why would they have you vote against guns? Well, they're just turning your swords into plowshares. They're preparing people for servitude. And if they raise you with the belief that the world is violent because your parents had guns, and the world is experiencing climate change and fire NATOs because your parents polluted with their capitalism, well, then it's easier when you have captive audience kids K through 12 to brainwash them against their parents.
That's what communists do. So the old ways, the traditional ways have to go. Out with the old, in with the new. But you have to destroy the old and replace it with the new. So we got to destroy the capitalist system that destroyed the planet and replace it with something new and green and progressive, like space, high tech. And then when you go to Mars, do you think you're going to have AR-15s? No, there's not going to be school shootings on Mars because there won't be need for any kind of weapons on Mars. Will there be? I mean, unless there are aliens, right? But if there aren't any aliens, then there's no need for weapons on Mars. But what a perfect scenario. Just like the movie The Village, where you have the people in the commune, born and raised in the commune, they have no idea that they're being held back technologically 2 centuries, that there's a road up just a few miles away, but they're trapped in this little commune by their own ignorance, reinforced by the elders, and there are monsters in the woods, so they can't leave at night. Well, the monsters are just the elders wearing monster costumes. Well, once you get people on Mars, it wouldn't be very difficult to invent an alien threat, and that's really what this is ultimately about, I think. It's just containing people with new threats. You already have a threat when you go to Mars. The atmosphere, lack thereof. You're already in a you're wearing a life support suit. The instant you step in that rocket and you blast your way off to outer space, you're in a life support suit. You're on a life support system until, it's crazy to me that people have that much faith and trust to even consider something like this. But anyway, TheGuardian.com has some people actually criticizing the whole Mars project. Yeah, good question. Someone here asked about the Mars dust. I find the Mars dust thing to be very interesting too. Like, how dusty is it when, 12 years up there, you've had that Mars rover and there's no dust on it? Every time I see a selfie of that Mars rover, there's no dirt on it. None. And what's more is, it can take selfies. But before it was sent up to Mars, selfies had not even been invented yet. That's, to me, NASA trying to connect with the younger generation with some crap. Just PR stunts. Like, I'm waiting for Disney to come out with a cartoon talking Mars rover, that if they don't already have it. Anyway, let's move on. We're talking about the Mars program and how there are people making a case against it. Humans will contaminate Mars. Here we go. Unlike previous craft sent to Mars, the mannequin called Starman sitting behind the wheel had not been sterilized. For this reason, scientists have described it as the largest load of earthly bacteria to ever enter space. As it happens, Tesla overshot its orbit, and at the time of this writing, which is just a few days ago, it's 88 million miles from Mars, drifting through the darkness of space with David Bowie on an infinite loop. If you believe that. Look at the timing of it, though. I don't know. It's absurd. I don't want to get too much into it, but I will at some point. There is a subtext to Starman and David Bowie, the man who fell to Earth, Lazarus, and a number of other elements to this story. Like, the Starman story is rather fascinating. In the trunk of that Tesla Roadster, they have a black box, a black cube, and inside it contains a collection of books by Isaac Asimov called the Foundation series. And the Foundation series is about starting a new world on Mars and how the founders get to decide what the civilization will look like. They're inventing their own world, their own culture. They can decide what to do away with. Just like every communist revolution, the revolutionaries decide. They're the founders. And so these people, these elite, they're engineering this new world for you, this new aeon, this new age, and they are the founders. And Isaac Asimov even described his writing as future history. Not sci-fi, but future history. And like I was saying earlier, these prophets are all liars who are using their lies to gain power and manifest the realities that they're describing with your consent. If humans eventually do land on Mars, they will not arrive alone. They will carry earthly microbes, trillions of them. See, that's your sin. I've told you that they've replaced the concept of sin with your carbon footprint. Your very life, your life force, your microbes are sin. They've replaced it. Heaven has been replaced with space. You can't bring sin to space, can you? You can't bring a shiny car to space, can you? Because that's an emblem of capitalism, of human ambition, desire for more, worldly lust, greed, everything else. You can't bring your shiny Cadillac to heaven. You can't bring your Pope mobile to heaven. And so what they're telling you here in the subtext, this is all Jesuit programming brought to you by The Guardian. What they're telling you here in the subtext is our human nature is unfit for the heavens that they've constructed. And this is where we get into transhumanism, and you'll see they're going to bring it up. So it goes on to say, our microbes will damage Mars irreversibly. We wouldn't be able to distinguish our indigenous life from the microbes we brought, and our presence will jeopardize our reason for being there, the search for life. Furthermore, there is no way of knowing how our microbes may react in the vulnerable Martian ecosystem. As Carl Sagan wrote, if there is life on Mars, I believe we should do nothing with Mars. Mars belongs to the Martians, even if Martians are only microbes. The preservation of life must supersede any possible use of Mars. That's Carl Sagan. That's the argument for not going to Antarctica. The idea that man is a contaminant, that man is sinful. This is what it comes down to. When they've convinced you that you are inherently sinful, that you have original sin, well, then they place themselves between you and being saved or being cleansed, being greened. And that's what it comes down to, reducing your carbon footprint. This is Mars's ice home concept, a nice little personal dome, a safe place to call home. Now here we go. Robots are better than humans. This is the transhumanist element here. What is a robot? Well, a robot is a human being sans passion, emotion, reproductive capacities, no carbon footprint, no life, in other words. Inanimate matter. It says one way to minimize the risk of contamination is to send robots to Mars instead of humans. I actually thought about this the other day, how this transhumanist agenda fits perfectly with the environmentalist thing. If it's about reducing your carbon footprint, it's almost as though they've made the case that robots do represent a higher form of life. If, like Sophia, for example, Sophia, which is the name of the feminine principle of, the goddess of wisdom. Sophia, the robot, speaks at the UN about the need to save the planet and a bunch of crap. It's like, you know what? If this robot was legit AI, it would parse through the data, see through the partisan hype, and recognize that global warming isn't an exact science, and that it's pretty much an article of faith. It's a political football being tossed around. But no, Sophia treats it like it's real, and we're supposed to trust Sophia because Sophia doesn't have any passion or any sort of motivation, any venal interest whatsoever, nothing. It's just impartial. It's just a distillation of ideas, and it's an oracle. We're supposed to just trust it. Like we're supposed to trust that scientists are objective, which is one of the biggest ruses that they've ever successfully perpetrated. Like we all understand journalists lie, but I think a lot of people still don't get that scientists are bigger liars than journalists. False prophets. Robots have several advantages. They're cheaper. They don't require vast support infrastructure, things like food, water, and breathable air. They're immune to cosmic radiation and dangers inherent to space travel, and they won't get bored. Okay, a few weeks ago, Europe's space agency found water on Mars. How convenient. Other arguments. Let's fix the Earth first. Stephen Hawking made his prediction we only have 100 years left. We have to become multiplanetary. We passed the point of no return. Musk has said apocalyptic asteroid collisions. This is fire and brimstone. Fires from the heaven will come down and destroy the Earth. And this is called science. There are people who consider this to be a scientific claim that we have 100 years to live unless we strengthen our defenses against asteroid collisions. It says here, there's no guarantee the same fate would not befall Mars colonists. And here we go. If something truly does happen to the Earth that's horrible, Will Mars be an effective salvation? See, this is the thing, salvation. Now, who's your savior? Like, let's say there is a big meteor coming down to crash the Earth. Who is your savior? Look at Elon Musk. That man is your savior. Or the guy who owns Amazon. Or Don Petit from NASA. These are your saviors. And the priest class have always presented us with doomsdays and saviors and the path to a better world, the obelisk, the emblem of the savior god, the rocket today, the promise of being multiplanetary, free from the wrath of globe. So in the event of an apocalyptic scenario, again, why are scientists talking about apocalyptic scenarios? This is your new priest class. It really is. And people fall for it. They have been falling for it. They think that science means believing what the guys in the white coats say. No, science is a methodology. This belief system about doomsday coming in 100 years, this is all fantasy. But it's going to be very difficult to get people to recognize that they're dealing with a religious system that's just been dressed up with science fiction. That sin literally has been recast as a carbon footprint. What's the verdict? It says here, perhaps we're not ready to go to Mars yet. We need to first update our policies on planetary protection. The good thing is we won't be ready for another 10 or 15 years. I like how they always push that back. Now, if you go to the NASA.com website, you can actually apply at JPL for the Mars landing event. Here we go. The InSight lander will touch down on Mars on Monday, November the 26th, to study the planet's interior. I love how accurate they are. Oh, it's a few million miles away, and we'll get there on Monday, November the 26th at about 9:03 a.m. I'm going to call the JPL. I almost want to call them right now. I don't really want a job right now, but they are hiring photographers, graphic artists, actors, musicians, writers, filmmakers. So, I mean, it's all theater. But I considered calling them and asking them if they have any comment about, we'll see. I'd like to ask them about Jack Parsons, to be quite honest. We won't do that right now, though. At some point, though, I'm going to make some calls. I want to come up with some ideas on how to approach it. I considered actually working there. It would be kind of fun. I'm not sure if I'm qualified, but we could find somebody here who is. Venice shoots for the moon in Hollywood Heavy Film Festival. Again, here they are trying to brainwash the youth into venerating the astronauts as heroes, when, if anything, it's what I would call stolen valor. William Shatner is more of an astronaut than Neil Armstrong. Because being an astronaut is just acting like you're in an extraterrestrial environment, and Neil Armstrong only acted on the moon. William Shatner's been everywhere. Let's see. So Venice, August 28th. First Man, being played by Ryan Gosling. He plays Neil Armstrong. Oh, this is bad. He's rebuilt the festival's reputation, screening a raft of Hollywood art house pictures like The Shape of Water, Gravity. But now they open with First Man. It's about the moon and the kitchen, aiming to show the personal side of the epic space adventure that saw Armstrong as a member of the 1969 Apollo 11 mission. Just brainwashing. If you believe that man landed on the moon, you're just being irresponsible and anti-intellectual. It's not like it hasn't been thoroughly debunked. And there are people who still think like they can defend it. Like it's just like, obviously it's true, it happened, I saw the pictures. Well, no, you haven't looked at the pictures. And if you want, let me go ahead and pick up a copy of, here, I'll be right back. I have a really good book on the subject called And I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. And that's by Jim Fetzer. I'm going to go through this book. There's like 6 or 7 points you may not have heard yet. And one of them I think is relevant to this discussion is it talks about how the astronauts have to handle waste disposal, human waste disposal, excrement. They talk about this a lot. And now I can see why they might be talking about robots. They might actually be overhyping how difficult it is to sustain a human life in space like that, to make the case that we ought to just send robots. Because, robots will be, it'll make it easier for them, I think, to carry out their deception. I mean, who questions what a satellite tells us? You can't. Just another oracle. You can question an astronaut. Astronauts can goof things up. But with robots, if they provide us, like the rover, why do we still believe the rover's there? To me, that's ludicrous. As a rover on Mars, going around testing the soil, taking selfies. But people will believe almost anything. And it's just a matter of tradition and habit. If you believe people landed on the moon, it's because you never took the time to think about it. That's why I'm saying, you're being anti-intellectual if you still believe we landed on the moon. There's not enough information to conclude that. You certainly don't know it. And all the evidence would suggest the opposite, that it was all staged. I mean, for whatever reason, the Apollo 11 mission that they presented you on TV never actually happened on the moon. It's ludicrous. I'm going to get that book and go through a few of these things. Okay, I found it. This is from, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. This is by Jim Fetzer and Mike Pelisek. And listen to this. No real proof astronauts landed on the moon. Only emotion, patriotic pride, and religious faith. What reason is there to believe we went to the moon anyway? If you think about it, there's no way at all that you can know if the moon landings were real unless you had been there yourself. If you believe it, you're taking it on faith. Yet, in spite of this, people treat the issue like a sacred religion that it's taboo to question. It's purely emotional and faith-based, not logical. The fact is, we don't have any real proof we went to the moon. We do have a lot of evidence to the contrary. There is no independent corroboration of it other than from NASA. All the alleged evidence by NASA has been refuted and shown to not be proof after all. The only reason people believe it is because they were told to believe it, and because everyone else believes it, and of course, due to patriotic pride of America being the first to land a man on the moon. But of course, authority does not equal truth, and neither do official announcements. So this is not a reason to believe. Nothing that Apollo defenders bring up stands up under scrutiny. Thus, the reason for believing in the Apollo missions are emotional, not logical. Without real evidence that stands up to scrutiny, belief in the moon landing becomes a religious faith, not one based on evidence, facts, or logic. And again, that's from, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. And you could say the same, not just for the moon landing, but for every aspect of the space program since then. I'll be right back. Actually, I have to get back to work. Go to infiniteplanesociety.com and sign up. This is Top of the Pyramid by Shoal Scanner.
Better spawns got a deep back, don't stop the clip. Never not to watch it no longer in gutters. And these pussy motherfuckers when they can't do shit. There's a store for this, there's a cream for that. Drop the knee, keeping all you motherfuckers fat. Going from one farm to the next. one, trying to figure out which one is the best one. Silly rabbit, catch up or get shot and then that syndrome gonna get your ass shit. Don't ask questions, just do what we say. Same old routine is forever and day. Take your ass to work. You gotta pay your bills. The rules are thrown for intervention, but the whips crack in the backstage bridge. Then I'm singing towards the eye of Ra. But first we got to dress to the switch. We are the world from the shadows. We make you worship gods you never knew existed. We take your soul to the gallows. We stole your free thought you never even resisted. Ritualistic, blood magic, sucking stem cells from a child broken neck. Insatiable, unspory vision and dread. Blurring the line between fiction and fact. Shoot your fat ass down and eat 33 hot pockets. Watch Space X1 33 fake rockets. And praise. Let us impregnate the sky with an obelisk. Let us close your mind like a sarcophagus. The all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid. Symbolistic subversion, mind controls of the pyramids. Let us impregnate the sky with an obelisk. Let us close your mind like a sarcophagus. The all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid. Symbolistic subversion, mind controls of the pyramids. Let us impregnate the sky with an obelisk. Let us close your mind like a sarcophagus. The all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid. Symbolistic subversion, mind controls of the pyramids. Let us impregnate the sky with an obelisk. Let us close your mind like a sarcophagus.